Hey guys, tonight we follow the life of someone you've never heard of because history didn't think she mattered. But the soft creak of a wooden floorboard, the way moss curls upward along a thatched wall, and the smell of time crushed under muddy boots, these were once the entire universe for someone. Tonight, we step into her shoes, or, more accurately, the ones she patched with pig gut thread. You've heard about witches before, maybe even the dramatic ones with curses and torches and trials. But this story isn't about the witch. It's about the person sweeping her floor, the apprentice, the assistant, the one people don't whisper about, but they definitely stared at. What if your entire job was to help someone who wasn't supposed to exist? And what if you still had to remember how to clean nettle stings and fetch firewood without waking the dead? Or worse, alerting the baker's wife. Welcome to a life of uneasy peace, vague threats, and porridge that always tastes a bit like dried roots. You probably won't survive this, but you also kind of already have, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down a narrow path between pine trees, each step softened by wet leaves, your basket knocking gently against your hip. The village is behind you, barely visible past the bend, but you can still feel the pull of its eyes, watching, even when no one's there. You're not a stranger, you're just not one of them anymore. Your feet know the way to the little stone cottage tucked under a slouching oak, and even if you close your eyes, you probably still find it by scent, wormwood, wood smoke, and the faintest metallic note of something drying in the rafters. The hut is older than anyone alive, and no one ever remembers a time when it wasn't there. The woman who lives in it, the one you now call mistress, has lived many lives, or so she says. To the villagers, she's just that one, the hedge witch, the wise woman, the old crone, depending on the season and whether or not someone's goat got ill last week. To you, she's a bit less mythic and a bit more cranky, especially before her tea. You open the creaking door. The first thing that hits you is the warmth, the kind that doesn't come from just the hearth. It wraps around you, smelling of dried rosemary, damp stone, and something faintly sweet lavender, maybe, or rotting apples. It's hard to tell. You set down the basket and start your morning the usual way by sweeping out leaves, checking the rat traps, and muttering under your breath that maybe today will be quiet. It won't be. A crow taps the window, just once. It doesn't stay long, but the mistress says that's never a good sign. You nod like you understand. You don't. She knows you don't. She smirks and hands you a bundle of something that smells like burnt mint. Hang this over the door, she says, in case they come today. You don't ask who they are. Your days as her assistant are not glamorous. You spend most of them ankle-deep in mud or elbow-deep in pestles. Mortar-stained fingers become your natural state. You learn that fennel seeds need to be dried upside down, that foxglove is both beautiful and deadly, and that no matter what you do, you will always knock over the cauldron on your second week. Everyone does. It's like a rite of passage. You did it, too. The stew soaked your boots and smelled like old socks for 3 days. She didn't yell. She just laughed and made you clean it with vinegar and crushed eggshells. For the humility, she said. The village pretends not to see you. That's fine. You pretend right back. But you notice things, like how the baker's wife walks her baby past your hut 3 times a week and never makes eye contact. Or how the butcher leaves an offering of dried meat on the stump near the woods, muttering that it's for the foxes. Foxes don't like salted lamb strips. Witches do, even quiet ones. You never asked for this job. It just happened. One day you brought her wild mushrooms you'd gathered, hoping for a few coins. She didn't pay you. She gave you soup and asked if you knew how to clean out a chimney. You said yes. She nodded. And now it's been 6 months. Your sleeping mat is under the window, thin but warm. She insists on a lavender bundle near your head for dreams. She says, they don't help. You still dream of fire sometimes, or of voices calling your name from a fog you can't walk through. Other nights, it's just silence, as thick as syrup. The villagers whisper stories about witches flying or speaking to animals. You know better. The mistress does talk to animals, but mostly to tell the cat to stop knocking over bottles. The only flying she does is when she stumbles on the uneven floorboards. One night, you stay up late grinding dried hawthorn, and you ask her, "Are you a witch?" She looks up, slowly. Her eyes are the color of stormy water and just as tired. "No," she says, "but let them think what they want. It's safer that way." There's something you don't understand in her tone. Something shaped like grief, but stitched up in defiance. You drop the subject. She hands you a sliver of cheese and tells you to eat. "You're no good to anyone starved," she mutters. And so your days continue. You learn to brew teas that ease aching bones, to pack poultices with care, to seal jars with wax and a whispered word. You learn that every full moon, she sits outside for an hour in silence, no matter the weather. You ask why once, she doesn't answer. The next full moon, you sit beside her, she nods once, and neither of you speaks. The world inside the cottage feels distant from the world outside. The fire crackles, the herbs swing gently in the rafters, and the copper pot bubbles even when no one is near it. You stop questioning that part, but every now and then, something shifts. A smell that wasn't there a moment ago. A feeling like you're not alone, even though you are. She tells you to stop picking at the veil with your questions. Some things are like skin, she says. Pull too hard, and it tears. You nod, pretending to understand. Again. But you do wonder, who was she before all this? And what happens when someone like her disappears? Does anyone notice? Does anyone write it down? Historians still argue whether local healers like her were feared or protected in their communities. Some say they were revered quietly, relied on in secret, and then abandoned when blame needed a face. Others claim they were always outsiders, walking the line between tolerated and expendable. Either way, no one keeps records of their assistance, and that's what you are. An assistant to someone who might not even be remembered. Your job is to keep the fire lit, the shelves stocked, and the door closed, especially when the wrong people knock. Outside, the wind picks up. The trees groan, old and brittle. You glance at the charm above the door, the one she made you hang this morning. You wonder, not for the first time, who exactly you're protecting yourselves from. You wake before the sun because that's when the dew is freshest, and she says the plants can feel it. The hearth is down to glowing coals. Your back aches from the straw mat, and the air tastes like damp linen and clove. You stretch quietly, careful not to knock over the bundle of dried angelica she left hanging too low last night. There's a comfort in the routine. You know how many steps it takes to reach the firewood stack with your eyes closed. You know which floorboard not to step on unless you want it to creak and wake the chickens. And you know, most of all, not to expect thanks. She's not cruel, just old. Older than the way people count years. You can see it in her hands. They look like dried birch bark, all creased and veined, but they move with surprising precision when she lifts a spoon, slices a root, or traces a symbol in the ashes. You gather your cloak and pull on the boots that never quite dry out, and you step into the morning fog. It wraps around your shoulders like a cold question. There's a well 3 minutes walk downhill. It leaks in winter and tastes faintly of iron, but she says the water's loyal, whatever that means. You carry 2 wooden buckets on a yoke across your shoulders. The weight is familiar. So are the stairs. You don't always see them, but you feel them. Curtains twitch, doors pause mid-swing. Once, a child waved at you, then got yanked back inside before your hand could rise. Your job is simple: fetch water, gather herbs, crush roots, don't be seen too much, don't speak too loudly, and absolutely never, under any circumstance, go into the village square alone. That last rule she never explained. She just said it with her teeth clenched and her back to you. Once, while grinding something too red to be beetroot. The village is older than the road that leads to it. Some houses sag like they've forgotten what joy is. Others look too new, too eager to belong. The people cling to routine like it's the only shield they have, because maybe it is. They go to church, they go to market, they avoid the woods after dusk, and they certainly don't visit your mistress. Not when they're healthy, not when anyone can see, but when someone's fever won't break, or when a baby comes too early, or when the dreams won't stop, then they send a cousin, or a servant, or someone's third son, usually at night, with a handful of coins and a prayer they won't admit to. You're the one who answers the door. You take the requests. You light the candle. She listens without speaking, nods once, and tells them what they already know, but needed to hear in someone else's voice. You're not like them anymore. Maybe you never were. Your chores fill your body with motion, which helps keep your mind from drifting into questions. You wash roots in rainwater, organize dried herbs by bitterness, and learn that some leaves only work if picked before dawn on the third Wednesday of a waning moon. Superstition, you asked once, arching a brow. Habit, she said. But habit is older than science. Sometimes you wonder who she was before she was this. You once found a comb wrapped in silk, tucked into a wooden box carved with initials that weren't hers. She caught you looking and didn't say a word, just took the box, placed it on a high shelf, and told you to sort the leeches. Yes, leeches. That's part of it too. You clean their jars twice a week. She insists on singing to them an old, slow tune in a language you don't recognize. You asked once. She said it was from a place no longer on maps. You let that answer sit. Not all your duties are strange. Some are just boring. There's a corner of the cottage that always smells like overripe onions. No matter how often you scrub it, there's a window that won't stay shut. No matter how many times you latch it, and there's a shelf you can never quite reach without standing on the spinning stool that once threw you to the floor in front of the visiting blacksmith. He laughed. You didn't, but some days are quiet. Some days it rains softly and the fire's kind, and your hands only smell like time. You sit near the hearth, cutting strips of linen into bandages, and she hums while stirring something green and bubbling. These are the moments that stretch, slow, and soften. You don't talk. You just exist, side by side, like a page and its shadow. Historians still argue whether women like her passed on real medical knowledge or simply folklore layered in ritual. You're starting to believe the answer is both. There are herbs she uses that match what you'd find in a monk's manuscript, but there are also times she sprinkles ash in a circle, mutters to herself, and tells you to tie a red string around your wrist just in case. In case of what you're afraid to ask. The role of an assistant is delicate. You're not a servant. You're not a student. You're something in between. You carry her burdens and sometimes her secrets. She trusts you with tasks, but not always with answers. Still, there's a rhythm to it, like a dance with steps no one wrote down, but everyone somehow knows. You remember one day, clearly late spring, the trees yawning into bloom, and you'd just finished preparing a tonic for a farmer's cough. She handed you a small pouch and told you to walk to the edge of the village and leave it under the elm tree alone. No questions. You did, but when you turned around, you thought you saw someone standing in the window of the chapel, just watching. You never told her. You didn't need to. That night, she added an extra iron nail to the door frame. She never called you her apprentice, but she taught you everything anyway. How to tell real fever from imagined. How to grind oak bark fine enough to draw out a splinter. How to brew ale that settles nerves but doesn't cloud the mind. How to speak without being heard. And most of all, how to stay invisible when it matters most. It's a strange life, being needed and unwanted all at once. You're the solution to a problem no one wants to name. The village pretends you're not there, until they need you to be, and even then, they'd rather not make eye contact. You learn to take pride in silence, in shadows, in half smiles and half truths. You pass the baker's daughter sometimes. She looks at you like she knows something. Not fear, not pity, just curiosity. Once, she asked your name. You told her. She smiled and didn't repeat it. Maybe that was a kindness. Names have power, after all. Or so she says. The truth is, you've started to forget what your life was before this. Before the hut, the herbs, the midnight visitors. You try to recall your first day here, and it's a blur of smoke, roots, and cold feet. You remember arriving. You don't remember why. Maybe you never needed a reason. Maybe this was always waiting for you, like dust waits for quiet corners. Outside, the sun finally rises, reluctant and pale. You finish tying bundles of mugwort and hang them above the doorway. She watches you, nods once, and pours tea into a chipped clay cup. It tastes like chamomile and something else, something bitter and grounding. You sip it slowly, you're learning. The third shelf from the fire is your nemesis. That's where the unlabeled bottles go, thick glass, dusty necks, and stoppers that leak if you don't twist them just right. You spend your morning inventorying what you can't name. One of them smells like sour cherries and pine sap, another like boiled eggs and despair. She insists you should be able to tell them apart. That one's for hoof rot. That one's for cramps. That one's for hexes you didn't mean to cast. You scribble vague sketches in your journal, careful not to mix the bottles up again after the last time. You'd reach for something that was definitely meant for sheep, and she'd laugh so hard she nearly choked on her dried apple slice. Good thing you only had a sip, she said. Otherwise, we'd be trimming your horns by now. You didn't know if she was joking, and you still aren't entirely sure. Your duties today are particularly uninspiring. Reorder the potions, sort the spoiled roots, and dispose of last week's stew forgotten, and now covered with a fur of green mold that waves gently when you breathe on it. Glamorous, as always, but you've grown used to the rhythm. It's not that you enjoy the smell of dried pig's lung, or the sharp sting of onion fumes in your eyes, though you're oddly proud of how long you can go without blinking now. It's just that the repetition feels safe. Everything in its jar, everything in its place. Unlike outside, where people lie with their eyes, and truth is traded like stale bread. The potion shelf is organized by moon phase, not alphabetically. The herbs don't like our letters, she says. They answer to tides. You used to laugh at that, but one night you tried rearranging them by color, and the next morning the cottage reeked of sour milk, and your skin itched for 3 days. You haven't tried again. There's a quiet tension under everything, like the floorboards are holding their breath. Even the cat, an antisocial beast named Clove, refuses to nap on her usual windowsill. She paces instead, tail flicking like a warning. You've learned to listen to the cat. She sees things first. You're chopping dried ginger when the door creaks open. It's no one you know, at least. Not well. A man in a worn hat, eyes flicking too fast, voice too low. He won't step inside, just hovers on the threshold. They said you could help. He doesn't say what's wrong. They never do at first. He places a cloth pouch on the stool just past the doorway. It clinks softly, the sound of coin and guilt. She takes it without a word. You brew the tea. That's the rule. As you grind and steep and strain, he starts to talk in fragments. She won't eat, won't speak. Something in her eyes. His wife, you guess, or daughter, or maybe even himself. Doesn't matter. He leaves with a bottle wrapped in waxed cloth and instructions to burn something before sunset. He nods, mumbles thanks, and disappears like smoke. You sit back down and return to your spoiled soup. It's gone blue, not green, not gray, blue. She peers into the pot, squints, and snorts. You put in the wrong time, she mutters. Again? This one's for flavor. That one's for fever dreams. You look at the nearly identical bundles and feel your stomach drop. The difference is subtle. One curls left, one curls right, and of course you grab the wrong one in the dim light. Well, don't drink it, she says. Give it to the foxes. They'll hallucinate a better life. You ladle the mess into a bowl and walk it out back. The foxes know you. They keep their distance, but you can hear them in the brush, sniffing, circling, deciding if this is worth the risk. One of them gets brave and snatches the bowl once you're back in the doorway. You don't watch to see what happens. You've learned not to get too attached. Back inside, she's already working on something new, steaming, thick, and amber-colored. She won't say what it's for. She rarely does. But the scent molasses, clove. A hint of smoke makes your eyes water and your heartbeat slow. Some brews do that, some do the opposite. You once had to clean the ceiling after she misjudged a batch of feverwort and it exploded mid-boil. She didn't speak for an hour after that, just stirred and stared and whispered something under her breath that made the fire flicker. The thing about being her assistant is that no one cares if you're good at it. They just care if you're quiet about it. You can burn the stew, mislabel the tincture, knock over 3 drying racks of elderflower, and the world will keep turning, but if someone sees you smiling too much, or carrying something too wrapped, or walking too confidently past the chapel, they'll start to wonder. And wondering is a dangerous thing here. Historians still argue whether witches were feared because of their power or because they reminded people of power they didn't have. Some say they threatened order. Others say they represented healing the church couldn't control. Either way, the woman you work for wears the label like an old coat, patched, faded, still warm. There's a sort of invisible map in your head now. You know where the herbs grow without looking. You know which villagers come with clean consciences and which ones wipe their feet too many times, hoping to scrub off the shame. You know how to move a kettle without sloshing, how to knot a bandage one-handed, how to crush dried rosemary with the flat of your knife and not lose the oils. What you don't know is how long you'll stay. Sometimes she looks at you like she's measuring time in your bones. Other times, like she's forgotten you were ever young. Once, while organizing dried mushrooms, you asked if she ever had an assistant before you. She blinked once, then twice, then simply said, "That's not a good question." Later that night, you found a carved spoon under your mat. Not one of yours. Not hers either. You still haven't touched it. The days slip by, slow as syrup, but somehow never long enough. The chores repeat, the faces blur, but the tension beneath everything remains. A tight thread pulled between silence and superstition, trust and treason, and you. You're just trying to keep the fire lit without burning your fingers. She asks you to gather willow bark before dusk. You do. You know where it grows, just past the creek that sings to itself when the wind gets lonely. On the way back, you pass a broken fence again and think about fixing it, but you don't. There are always more important things, like keeping the blue soup out of the main stew pot, or remembering which mushrooms glow in the dark, or making sure the bottles on the third shelf stay exactly where she left them. You fall asleep that night with the taste of dried clover on your tongue and the distant sound of an owl asking a question no one wants to answer. It's well past moonrise when the knock comes. Not the kind of knock that says neighbor or friend, but the kind that's afraid of its own echo. 3 taps, hesitant, then silence. You look at her. She doesn't look back. Her hands keep working the thread through a tear in her robe, but you can see her listening with her whole spine. You set down the cup you were drying, wipe your hands on your apron, and move to the door. You don't open it fast. You never open it fast. The wood is damp beneath your palm, the night air pushing through the cracks with a scent of wet ash and pine. You open just wide enough to see his face, the mayor, or at least the man who insists on being called that, even though this village is too small for real titles. He's red-cheeked, breathing through his mouth, and scratching his arms like they're crawling with invisible fire. You don't move. He doesn't speak. For a moment, it's only his breath and the owl behind you. Then, in a voice that's both too low and too loud, he mutters, "They said she might help." You let him in. He won't sit. He stands in the center of the room, swaying like the floor is moving. She looks up, takes one glance, and says nothing, just gestures to the stool by the fire. He doesn't take it. Instead, he unrolls a sleeve and shows his forearm. You don't flinch, but you want to. The skin is red, raised, patterned like old tree bark, and scabbed in places where he scratched too hard. You've seen it before, in books, and once on a farmer's neck. She walks over, takes a closer look, and says only 2 words, birch rot. It's not a real illness, not in any book you've read, but she says it like it's something the forest gives people when they lie too long about what they need. You fetch the salve without being told the one with the mossy smell and the specks of crushed amber. She applies it gently, wrapping his arm with a strip of linen dyed with elderberry juice. He winces, then exhales like something has left his chest. When he finally speaks, it's not about the rash. She's been seeing things, he says. My wife. Shadows. Faces. Sometimes she speaks in other voices, or just sings. He doesn't say the word, but it hovers there anyway. Possession, madness, witchcraft. The very things he likes to condemn publicly, but whispers about when no one's watching. She doesn't answer. Instead, she pours him a draft from the dark bottle on the top shelf, the one you've never been allowed to touch. He drinks it without asking what's in it. That's how desperate he is. She tells him to bring her here, The wife, in secret, at dusk, he nods, scratches at his wrist, and nearly bolts out the door without waiting for a goodbye. Once he's gone, you close it slowly, latch it twice, and lean your head against the cool wood. They only come when they're scared, she says softly, not looking at you. The rest of the night is spent grinding herbs you've never labeled. She moves faster than usual, setting out candles, shifting furniture, drawing a circle on the floor with chalk and something thicker, darker. Is it really a possession, you ask? Or something else? She shrugs. Could be grief, could be guilt, could be mushrooms in her bread. You never know when she's being serious. Sometimes you think she doesn't know either. Historians still argue whether medieval ailments were more often spiritual metaphors or misunderstood physical conditions. You're starting to believe they were both. People get sick when their minds break. People see shadows when they're too afraid to name the light. But whether it's madness or magic, your job is the same: fetch the basin, light the candles, watch the shadows, and hold the silence steady. The next evening, she comes. Not the mayor this time, just a boy, maybe 13, wide-eyed and silent, guiding a woman by the hand. She walks like her knees don't know how to bend, and her eyes never blink. You take her cloak, feel the weight of it, damp and heavy as regret. She doesn't speak, doesn't sit, just stands in the circle your mistress traced the night before, swaying gently like tall grass before a storm. The boy is dismissed. You close the door and begin. The next hour blurs. She murmurs words in a cadence older than language. You hand her the things she gestures for: feathers, stones, a bit of silver buried in salt. The woman hums at one point, low and strange. Then she laughs. Then she cries. Then nothing. Silence so thick your ears ring with it. The fire dims on its own. The shadows move against the walls in ways that make no sense. At one point, you swear something brushes your ankle, but there's nothing there. When it's over, the woman collapses. Your mistress catches her like a falling branch, lays her down on the mat, and covers her with a quilt you didn't know you had. You watch her breathe, shallow and clean. Something has left her. You don't know what. You don't ask. She wakes an hour later, smiling like a child waking from a dream. She doesn't remember how she got here. She thanks you for the tea you never gave her. They leave before sunrise. No one speaks of payment. The mayor never returns. But you feel it. Something shifted. The air in the cottage heavier, the silence less friendly. Clove won't come inside. The herbs wilt a little faster. The fire takes longer to light. She's quieter too. Not sad, exactly. Just pulled inward. Like she left a piece of herself inside that circle and hasn't figured out how to sew it back in. You want to ask if she's okay, but you've learned not to waste words like that. Instead, you bake bread for the first time in months. It's too hard, too dry, but she eats it anyway. Says it reminds her of something, doesn't say what. The next few days pass in soft echoes. The potions are quieter, the candles burn lower, no one knocks. You think maybe things are returning to normal until you find the charm over the door has cracked in half. She notices, frowns, and replaces it with something older: iron nails twisted into a shape you don't recognize. The veil's thinning, she mutters. It always does after these things. You want to ask what things, but instead you nod, pick up the broom, and sweep the ashes a little slower than usual. That night, you dream of voices in the walls and hands reaching from the floor. You wake sweating, the quilt tangled around your legs like vines. She's already up, already boiling water, already pretending everything is fine. You don't press. The cottage lives. It creaks when it's anxious. It rattles when it's cold. It groans when something is coming. And right now, it's very quiet. You listen and wait. The chickens are acting strange again. They've stopped laying, for one, and for another, they won't come near you. Normally, they gather when you bring the scraps, the ends of carrots, crushed barley, the occasional sliver of beetroot, but this morning they huddle in the corner of their coop, watching you like you've forgotten your place. Clove prowls around them like she's expecting something to hatch that never will. You set down the bucket, back away slowly, and remind yourself they're just birds. Then again, everything starts with small things. That's what she always says. Illness, magic, trouble. It's never a lightning strike at first. It's always a smell, a twitch, a glance. And this morning, the chickens are telling you that something has shifted again. When you return to the cottage, she's sitting cross-legged by the hearth, her eyes closed, her fingers wrapped around a wooden pendant carved with symbols you don't recognize. Her lips are moving in silence. You don't interrupt. Instead, you begin your tasks grinding dried valerian root, refilling the salt basin, checking the smoke vent. The cottage smells different today. Less like herbs, more like dust that hasn't settled. You don't ask, but you notice. In the afternoon, a child arrives, alone. She's maybe 7, hair matted, clothes too thin. She doesn't speak, but holds out a pouch, rough cloth tied with string. Inside is a broken comb, 3 beans, and a dried flower that crumbles when you touch it. A payment, of sorts. You glance at your mistress. She nods once and tells you to fetch the bitter tonic, the one stored in the dark gourd bottle sealed with beeswax. You pour a single spoonful, stir it into warm milk, and hand it to the girl. She drinks it with a grimace, then crawls under the bench and falls asleep. You never learn her name. That evening, when you clean the tools, she speaks without turning. "They'll blame us," she says. They always do. You know what she means before she says it. The chickens, the milk going sour too quickly, the fish not biting. Little misfortunes strung together like beads until someone ties them around your neck. All it takes is one mouth to speak it aloud. Witch, hex, curse, and then the game changes. You ask what you're supposed to do. Feed the fire, keep the door locked, don't look anyone in the eye for a while. She's half joking, but only half. Historians still argue whether medieval accusations of witchcraft were fueled more by religion or resentment. You think it's simpler people hate what they can't explain, and they hate even more the ones who don't need them to explain it. And your mistress, she never asks the village for anything. Not food, not protection, not even recognition. She exists entirely outside their circle, which makes her dangerous. You wonder sometimes why she stays. She could have moved deeper into the forest. She could have disguised herself as a widow or a weaver. She's clever enough, but she doesn't. Maybe because there's power in being seen and feared, or maybe because she knows the danger would follow her anyway, like a dog that's tasted blood. You remember last month, when the miller's son twisted his ankle and they came to you at dusk, desperate, angry, humble. You brewed the root infusion, wrapped the leg in comfrey, and they left without thanks. But the next morning, someone scratched devil into your fence post, and someone else left a dead squirrel by the door. Mixed messages, as always. You finish your evening chores quickly. The chicken still won't look at you. Clove won't come inside. The wind sounds like it's circling the roof rather than passing over it. The firewood you stack cracks and splits like it's resisting the flame. You light it anyway. Sometimes the ritual matters more than the result. As night falls, she hands you a satchel. "You'll take the charm to the blacksmith," she says. "Leave it in the hollow stump. Don't speak, don't stop." You nod. You know the stump. It's been there since you arrived, marked with runes that never quite vanish, even in the rain. You tuck the satchel into your cloak, tighten your boots, and set out under a sky so full of stars, it feels like you could fall into it if you look too long. The walk is quiet, too quiet. Even the frogs are silent. The path crunches underfoot, dry and cold. You hear something ahead, twigs breaking, maybe a deer, but it never shows itself. When you reach the stump, you pause, just long enough to glance inside. There's already something there. A ribbon, red, fresh. You drop your package beside it and walk away faster than you arrived. Back at the cottage, she's already asleep, or pretending to be. You sit by the fire and try to warm your hands, but they stay cold. The next morning, there's gossip in the air. Not words yet, just a change in temperature. The baker's wife won't meet your gaze. The tailor's shutters are drawn. A dog growls as you pass. You don't need to hear the words to know what they are. The accusations never come all at once. They trickle, like leaks in a roof. At first, it's looks, then mutters, then someone leaves a charm made of bones on your doorstep, badly made, clearly done in haste, but meant as a warning. She burns it in the hearth and spits 3 times into the flame. They think we'll run, she says. They always think that. You don't want to run. Not yet. But you start to prepare anyway. You make sure the travel cloaks are dry. You double check the jars that need to be buried if you leave in a hurry. You move the emergency coin pouch closer to the door. She notices, says nothing. One night, you dream of the chickens. They speak in riddles. When you wake, you find one of them dead in the yard neck, bent. No wounds, just still. The village blames foxes, but you know it wasn't foxes. Foxes don't place feathers in spirals around the body. You bury it at the edge of the property, not too deep, not too shallow. She says the earth knows what to do. You whisper something you don't understand over the grave. You've never felt more like her assistant than in that moment. The sun rises slowly the next day, as if it isn't sure it wants to be involved. You sit on the stoop with a chipped cup of barley tea, watching the fog unravel across the trees like someone pulling apart a wool blanket. Your fingers are stained with the last night's ash, and your back still aches from crouching over the herb beds, trying to replant the mugwort after something dug it up. She didn't comment when you told her, just grunted and said to pack the soil tighter next time. You did. You always do. But some things, it seems, just don't want to stay buried. You spend the morning hanging nettles to dry. It's a hateful task. The sting clings to your fingers no matter how many layers of cloth you wear. She says it builds character. You suspect it just builds scar tissue. The trick is to pinch near the stem and move quickly, but not so quickly that you snap the leaf. You're not sure what hurts more, the sting or the memories it stirs. Your first week here, you'd cried from the pain, thinking you'd done something wrong. She'd handed you a pot of mashed plantain and said, "Cry quieter. The herbs are listening." Now, you don't cry. You don't even flinch. The nettles crackle as you bind them into bundles with waxed thread, labeling each with the date and the phase of the moon. You place them on the upper racks, just far enough from the hearth that they won't dry too fast. She inspects them later and doesn't say anything. That's praise. It's easy to forget, in these quiet moments, that the outside world still exists, that people are still watching, still whispering, that the sound of your footsteps still makes someone's jaw clench. You haven't been to the village in days, maybe a week. Time here doesn't move in hours. It moves in tasks. Dry this, mix that, stir for 3 breaths, then cool in shadow. But sooner or later, someone always shows up. And today, it's the shepherd's wife. She arrives just before noon, barefoot and wild-eyed, holding a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. She doesn't knock, just pushes the door open like it's her right. And for a second, you wonder if she's here to accuse or to beg. Then she unwraps the cloth, and you see what she's carrying: a lamb. Still breathing, but barely. Its eyes are clouded, its legs twitching, its mouth foaming with something yellow. She doesn't explain. She doesn't need to. You clear the table. She lays it down, and your mistress doesn't waste time. She moves like water fluid, direct. You hand her the rosemary oil, the marigold paste, the honey. She mixes them without measuring, murmuring under her breath in a tongue you don't recognize. You hold the lamb's legs, feel the tremors running through them, and try not to think about the fact that it's probably already too late. But the ritual matters. The effort matters. Even if the outcome doesn't, it dies anyway. You watch its breath slow, then stop, then disappear entirely. The shepherd's wife presses her forehead to the table, sobbing without sound. Your mistress wraps the lamb in a clean cloth, ties it with a red string, and hands it back without a word. The woman takes it, nods once, and leaves. No payment, no thank you, just grief. Like a fog, trailing behind her as the door swings shut. You sit down. You don't say anything. There's nothing to say. She returns to grinding dried fennel like nothing happened. You watch her hand steady, unshaken, as though life and death are no more unusual than rain or soup. You wonder what it takes to become like that. How many lost lambs? How many silent mothers? How many unmarked graves? She notices your stare, shrugs, and says, "Not everything wants to be saved." Historians still argue whether wise women practiced healing or simply accompanied suffering. You think the answer lies somewhere between you don't fix pain, you just keep it company until it decides to leave, or doesn't. That night, you go to bed with nettle welts on your hands and the image of the lamb still imprinted on your mind. You dream of a field where everything is silent and the grass grows too tall. In the morning, you find a single white hair on your blanket. You don't own anything white. You don't mention it. Instead, you clean the cauldron, which now smells faintly of vinegar and burnt salt. You stir the embers, feed the fire, sweep the floor in slow, practiced arcs. She's out back gathering yarrow and tansy, muttering to herself about timing and tides. You let her have her space. You've learned that the best way to help her is often just to stay out of the way. Until she calls for you, "Come look," she says, standing by the edge of the herb garden. You join her. She points to the soil. There's a crack running through it, dry and pale, like the earth itself is splitting open. "Wasn't here yesterday?" she says. Something's shifting. You kneel, press your fingers to the dirt. It feels wrong, too warm, too soft, like it's been stirred from below. You glance at her, and for the first time in weeks, she looks uncertain. You cover the crack with fresh compost, tamp it down, and plant mint over it. You don't ask what she thinks it means, but that night, you both sleep with knives under your pillows. You wake to find she's already up, already boiling something thick and bitter. You don't ask what it's for. She doesn't offer, but there's a new charm above the door-knotted twine, feathers, and a coin pressed flat. You don't recognize the design. She tells you not to touch it. You nod. The day continues like they always do, but everything feels half a step off. The bread doesn't rise, the cat won't eat, the broth boils too fast. You slice your finger on a jar you've opened 100 times before. The herbs don't smell right. The fire crackles like it's angry. You finish your tasks and sit by the hearth. Watching the shadows lengthen, she sits across from you, her eyes half closed. Then she says, softly, "It's beginning." You don't ask what, you already know. She wakes you before dawn with a whisper. "We're going to a birth," she says, already dressed, already pulling jars from the shelf and wrapping them in cloth. You don't ask who. That's never how it works. If someone has come to her, it means they've already risked everything. You throw on your cloak, still damp from yesterday's mist, and follow her into the forest path that cuts behind the village like a secret vein. The light is gray, soft, and full of secrets. Your boots crunch over frostbitten leaves, and neither of you speak for the first mile. There's something reverent about these walks, like the world knows to hold its breath. The house is small, low-roofed, tucked into a corner of the valley where the fog tends to settle longer than it should. A single candle flickers in the front window. She knocks once. The door opens without a word. Inside, a woman lies on a straw mattress, her face soaked in sweat, her hands gripping the blanket like she's trying to hold herself in one piece. Two others are in the room, an older woman with tight lips, and a man you assume is the husband, though he looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. She moves quickly, setting out the tools, the willow bark tincture for pain, the dried raspberry leaves for strength, a smooth stone to place beneath the pillow. You've seen her do this before. There's a rhythm to it, almost a dance. You know your role: boil the water, heat the cloths, crush the fennel seed into paste. The room smells of blood and lavender and something you can't name. The labor is long. Hours pass like slow waves, rising and breaking. The woman screams once, twice, then goes silent, too silent. Your mistress checks, mutters something under her breath, and reaches for the long, bone-handled spoon. She nods at you. Hold her hand. You do. It feels like fire and fear. Eventually, there's the wet, sharp cry of new life, and you exhale before you even realize you are holding your breath. A baby, slick and red and impossibly loud, is placed on the mother's chest. The older woman cries. The man stares, stunned. Your mistress wipes her hands, looks at the child, and then so softly you almost miss it, she whispers, "She'll be different. No one else hears." Or maybe they pretend not to. Afterward, you clean up the mess. The cloths are stained deep, and you burn them in the hearth. You bury the afterbirth under the hawthorn tree out back. She insists on that. Always a tree. Always one that can protect. You leave a coin beneath it, just in case. On the walk home, your hands still smell of blood and lemon balm. She's quiet, not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind. You don't speak. You just keep walking, letting the cold bite your cheeks while the trees lean in, as if listening. That night, the house feels heavier, but warmer. She lights every candle, something she rarely does, and leaves the door ajar for exactly 7 minutes. You time it. You don't ask why. Historians still argue whether village midwives were feared or respected. If their presence was a blessing or a threat, you know the answer isn't clean. They were called upon in desperation and forgotten in celebration. If the child thrived, it was God's will. If the child faltered, it was her fault. Always her fault. You learn quickly that midwifery isn't about birth, it's about balance. It's about standing on the line between life and death and knowing which way to lean. You ask her once how many babies she's delivered. She doesn't answer, just says, "Not all of them made it." You don't ask again. A week later, someone leaves a basket of eggs at your door. Not a word, not a note, just the eggs. Warm and too perfect to be accidental. You know who they're from. You boil 2, feed 1 to clove, and save the shells for grinding. She says they're good for bone salves. The chickens still aren't laying, but the villagers aren't complaining about it anymore. Not aloud. You begin to notice patterns. Who comes for help? Who pretends they never did? Who leaves offerings where they think you won't see them? A blue ribbon around the base of a tree. A copper coin at the edge of the well. You collect them all, silently, gently, like they're confessions. One evening, the baker's youngest daughter shows up with a burn on her hand. She fell, the girl mumbles, on the stove. The skin is blistered, raw. You clean it, apply the salve, wrap it tight. She thanks you. Her eyes never leave yours. When she leaves, your mistress watches through the window. Her mouth tight. "That's the 2nd time this year," she says. You both know it won't be the last. You ask if you should say something. She shakes her head. "Not our fight," she mutters, but later. You find a small bundle tucked in the girl's satchel. Dried heather, thyme, and a charm made of twine and ash. "For protection," she says. Sometimes kindness is quieter than anger. You try to remember that. The seasons shift. The herbs you once struggled to identify now bloom at your touch. You can name them by smell, texture, even the way they fold in on themselves when drying. You start your own batch of tinctures. She lets you, doesn't say much, just nods when you show her your shelf. "Don't poison anyone," she says, "at least not without a reason." You laugh, sort of. The dreams return. This time it's not lambs or chickens. It's faces, half lit, half turned. Voices in a language you almost understand, but not quite. You wake with your palms clenched and the sheets tangled like vines. She knows. You don't tell her, but she knows. One morning, there's a new charm above your bed. You say nothing. She says less. She teaches you to scry. One day, without warning, she places a bowl in front of you, black and silver, filled with water, flecked with oil and crushed myrrh. "Look," she says. You do. You see only yourself at first, then shapes, smoke, movement. You think you see fire. You think you see her, younger, running. You blink. It's gone. She nods. Good. You didn't scream. You wonder if someone else did. She never teaches you directly. Not really. She just does things near you until you learn them. How to feel the pulse of a root before picking it. How to listen to the wind and know if it's bringing illness. How to cut string at just the right length for wrapping bones. It's not just a trade. It's a translation. You're learning how to read a world most people pretend doesn't exist, and you're getting better. The mistake was small. That's what you tell yourself, over and over. A pinch too much of something bitter. A root swapped for its look-alike. A moment's distraction while measuring the syrup. You were tired. It was late. The client was a fisherman who wouldn't meet your eyes. He said it was for his nerves. You gave him the bottle, and he gave you a coin so old the king's face had faded off it. You told her the next morning. She nodded slowly, the way she does when she's trying not to sound alarmed. "Show me what you gave him," she said. And when you did, her eyes narrowed, and her voice dropped to a whisper that was not syrup of poppy, that was bleeding root. "That man's about to have some very interesting dreams." And he did. The next day, the whole village heard about it. The fisherman was found in his boat before dawn, half naked, shouting at the river like it owed him a favor. When they pulled him out, he wept. Claimed he saw his dead wife feeding coins to a bird made of smoke. He hasn't spoken since. You told her you were sorry. She didn't scold you. Just handed you a cloth and said, "You'll clean the ladles with salt water now. And triple check every label. We're not painting dreams here. We're keeping people from falling into them." The cottage feels colder after that. You second guess every jar, every spoonful. You test even the teas twice, but the villagers don't seem angry. They're more curious. They start talking, not loud, but not as carefully as before. And not all of it is bad. She gave him a vision. Someone says at the well. Maybe he needed to see it. Maybe she knows more than she lets on. For a while, it's almost flattering. Then the baker's wife says something sharper. "That's how it starts," she mutters, her apron fluttering in the wind, one dream at a time, until the whole village is asleep and she's the only one left awake. You start keeping your hood up when you walk near the square. Then comes the stew. It's a normal evening. You've just returned from foraging. Your hands smell like wild garlic and moss. Your knees are muddy, and your basket is full of burdock root, nettle, and a few stubborn dandelions. You bring it in, chop what you need, and start the stew barley. Wild onion, broth thick with marrow, a bit of sage, a bit of thyme. She tastes it once, makes a face, adds a splash of something from a vial you don't recognize. You both eat. She sleeps early. You stay up, rereading your notes and organizing the dried leaves on the back wall. Then, around midnight, your stomach turns. It's subtle at first, a strange heaviness, then sharp heat, like someone lit a candle inside your ribs. You stagger to the basin, and the sickness comes in waves, bitter, metallic, unrelenting. You can't even call for her, but you don't need to. She's already there, kneeling beside you, wiping your mouth, whispering something low and firm. She makes you drink something thick and black that tastes like tree bark and soot. You gag, but swallow. She holds your shoulder as your body shakes. You don't sleep, you sweat, you hallucinate. A figure in the corner of the room that won't stop moving. A voice that sounds like your own, repeating your name backwards. At one point, you think you see the stew pot still bubbling even though there's no fire. It passes by dawn. Barely, when you finally sit up, your lips are cracked and your hands won't stop trembling. She's watching you, arms folded, face unreadable. "What did I do?" you manage to croak. She doesn't answer. Not at first. Then someone cursed the time. You stare at her. She points to the herb jar. The label is correct, but the contents are not. "It's wolfsbane," she says, voice flat, dried to look like thyme. Enough to poison, not enough to kill. You look again. It's true. The leaves are curled slightly different, the color a little duller. You'd missed it. You, who pride yourself on being able to name every sprig in the cottage. "Someone knew what they were doing," she says, "and they wanted us to know they knew." You burn the jar. The smell fills the house, sharp, bitter, wrong. You replace every herb, every label, every string-tied bundle. She watches, helps, sometimes. Mostly she watches. For a few days, everything is still. Even the birds seem quieter. Then someone knocks. You freeze. She answers. It's the woman who sells apples in the market. Her daughter has a fever. No one else will help. The priest says it's punishment. The neighbors won't lend cloth. She offers a basket of shriveled pears in payment. Your mistress takes it. You brew the fever tea, this time watching each leaf like it might bite you. She carries it back herself. When she returns, she's silent for hours. That night, she hands you a small blade, carved bone handle, sharpened obsidian edge. Keep it on you, she says, even when you sleep. You don't argue, you tuck it into your boot. Historians still argue whether herbs like wolfsbane were misunderstood medicine or deliberate malice. Here, there's no debate. That wasn't an accident. It was a message. From who, you still don't know. But the stew turned blue the next time you cooked it. You didn't even use herbs. She laughed when she saw it, the sound dry and brittle. Sometimes the house protects us, she said. Sometimes it just wants to remind us it can. The blue didn't go away. You poured it down the drain, and the earth where it landed refused to grow anything for 3 weeks. You hung a new charm above the hearth after that oak twigs. Red thread, a small bell that rings when no one moves. It rings twice in the night that week. You don't sleep much, but you work better, sharper, quieter. You've learned now. The danger isn't just out there in the woods or in the rumors that cling to your name. It's in the ordinary things. A jar mislabeled, a pinch too much, a stew pot left unattended. Magic isn't fire and light. It's habits. It's patterns. It's what gets inside you when you think you're safe. She says nothing more about the poisoning. You stop asking, but the bell keeps ringing. The bell above the hearth rings again at dawn. And this time, there's no wind. You're kneeling on the floor, bundling comfrey leaves into sachets for muscle aches. When you hear it clear and crisp, like it's being pulled by a hand you can't see, she looks up from her seat by the window, doesn't speak, just watches the bell swing on its own. Something's shifted, she says. Not like a warning, but like someone commenting on the weather. And sure enough, moments later, a shadow passes the window. Not fast, not slow. You rise without a word and open the door. There's no one on the step, but on the ground is a folded piece of parchment, damp at the edges, tied with black string. You pick it up, fingers careful not to smudge whatever it's trying to say. Inside, scrawled in shaky charcoal lines, are 4 words bread tastes wrong again. No signature, no name, but you know who it's from. The baker's apprentice. She's been whispering for weeks about stomach cramps, strange dreams, bread that won't rise properly. You showed her how to use fennel seeds last time. She left you half a honey cake in return. Now it's more serious. She watches as you read the note aloud. We go tonight, your mistress says, already rising, already collecting the long matches and the ash-soaked satchel of purifying herbs. You prepare the usual bundle salt, rosemary, charcoal plus the small copper spoon you're only supposed to use for unseen things. You pack a second cloak, too. You don't know why, just in case. Evening takes its time. The village is unusually still. Even the dogs don't bark as you pass. You slip through the alleys like ghosts, cloaks wrapped tight, footsteps practiced and soft. The baker's shop is quiet, no candle in the window, but the door's ajar, and the smell hits you immediately. Yeast and mold and something off, like spoiled honey. The apprentice is inside, pale as bone, sitting near the oven with her knees pulled up to her chest. She doesn't look at you, just nods toward the back, for the sourdough starter is bubbling black. That's not metaphor. It rises and falls like it's breathing. A slick, unnatural shine has formed across its surface, and the bowl is warm to the touch, too warm. You glance at her. When did it start? She shrugs. Yesterday. It wouldn't stop moving. Your mistress nods. Something's nested. She pulls a sprig of sage from her sleeve and tosses it into the starter. It sizzles. The apprentice gasps. Is it cursed? She asks. No, your mistress replies. Curses need intention. This is invitation. You left something open. The girl starts to cry. You cleanse the space. You work quickly, salt at the doors, charcoal circle, bell rung 3 times. Counterclockwise, you burn the starter. It screams. Not loud, but loud enough. You bury the remains in the old well behind the bakery. She drops in a penny. You drop in a prayer. When it's done, the apprentice hugs you. She's shaking. Will it come back, you ask? Your mistress only says, "Not if she remembers how to close her doors." You walk home in silence. When you return, Clove is waiting on the roof. She jumps down, lands with a thump, and disappears inside. She hasn't done that in weeks. The cottage feels colder. You light the fire, hang your cloak, and sit by the hearth. She makes you tea, licorice root, and lemon balm. You drink it slowly. Why bread, you ask? Because people trust it, she says. And that's where it starts. Not in poison or flame, but in what's supposed to be safe. Historians still argue whether charms and talismans truly held power or merely offered psychological comfort. You're starting to see how the line between the two doesn't really matter. If someone believes a charm protects them, it does. Until it doesn't. Until they forget to hang it. Until they leave a door open. Until they let something in. The next morning, a piglet shows up at the edge of the herb garden. Alone, dirty, shivering. You bring it inside without asking. Wash it, feed it, wrap it in a cloth. Clove sniffs it once and walks away. You name it Bramble. She laughs when you say it aloud. Don't name things you can't keep, she warns. You ignore her. Bramble stays. The piglet makes you smile again. That feels dangerous. You begin hearing stories in the village. Someone's goat has started screaming at night. Someone else's child wakes up covered in ash. A jar of honey exploded in the chapel. Small things, dismissible things, but you know better. You feel the rhythm under the noise. It's building, like pressure under the skin. Then come the leeches. You're changing their water when you see it. One of them has split, literally, a crack down its back, like it was cut with a knife. But it's still alive, still moving. You call her over. She inspects it, frowns, and burns the entire jar. They're trying to send us messages, she says. They're getting lazy. You start sleeping in shifts after that. One of you always stays awake. You begin hearing whispers in the walls. Not voices, just whispers. She hears them too. One night, she takes down the mirror over the wash basin and throws it into the hearth. No explanation. You don't ask. You help clean up the glass. Later, she tells you something that doesn't sound like a joke. The last time this happened, I was the apprentice. You stare at her. What happened to your teacher, you ask? She left. She says, in pieces. You don't sleep that night. You scrub the floor instead. At dawn, you find a mark etched into the doorframe, nothing you recognize. Not one of yours. Not one of hers. It's fresh, carved, deliberate. She traces it with her thumb and mutters something you can't hear. Then she locks the door. All 3 locks. We're being tested, she says. Let's see how clever they think we are. You spend the day redrawing every line of protection. The salt gets replaced. The bones get repositioned. The jars are sealed with wax, not cloth. Every spoon is turned upside down. You burn juniper at every hour's turn. You speak the names of herbs aloud before using them. Still, something scratches at the window that night. Just once. Just enough to remind you it's there. You sit by the fire with Bramble curled against your ankle and a bell in your lap. You don't ring it. You just hold it and wait. You don't get invited to the harvest festival. You knew that already. But it's different when you feel it. The way the music carries through the trees and wraps around your cottage like a silk ribbon meant to exclude you. The way the laughter echoes just long enough to sound cruel. The village is alive tonight, glowing with firelight and fresh bread, and people who've decided, collectively and quietly, that you do not belong. You sit on the back step, far from the path, far from the lantern strung across the square. Bramble sniffs your lap, rooting around for crumbs, and you stroke his coarse fur absent-mindedly. The cat is gone again. She comes and goes these days like she knows something's coming and doesn't want to be there when it arrives. Inside, she's steeping something thick and black in the cauldron, something that smells like wet cedar and rust. You didn't ask what it's for. She didn't offer, just in case. She said earlier, that's become her answer for everything. You stir the ashes in the hearth. Make a mental list of what's missing from the shelves: mullein, sagebrush, the last of the bone needles. You'll need to go foraging tomorrow, but not into the woods near the village. Not anymore. Not since the last time someone followed you back. Historians still argue whether medieval festivals were tools of social bonding or quiet exclusion. You know the answer depends entirely on where you stand. From inside the circle, they're celebration. From outside, they're a reminder. You remember them from before you came here, before your hands smelled like smoke and vinegar, before you learned how to lace charms through the soles of your boots. You used to dance. You used to sing. Now you measure roots in silence while someone else takes your place under the lanterns. She doesn't say anything about the festival, doesn't even glance toward the glow on the horizon. She just adds 3 drops of something red to the pot and tells you to slice the dried apples thinner this time. If you do it wrong, they curl like tongues, she says. You make a face. She smirks. It would be easier if they hated you. Hate has edges, definitions, a temperature you can work with, but this careful pretending, this not looking, not speaking, not naming, it's harder. You don't know where you stand when you're not even considered. You find another charm outside the next morning. This one is more intricate twisted straw, a pebble wrapped in hair, a bone needle stuck through the center, not meant to hurt, not directly, but meant to say we know you're there. She doesn't touch it, makes you burn it without looking at it too long. They're watching to see if we flinch. She mutters, "We won't." You return to your tasks with sharper focus. Everything is cleaned with salt water now. Every herb is tested twice. You keep cloves under your tongue when you walk near the village. You sew tiny bells into the hem of your cloak, not enough to ring, just enough to remind. The days get colder. The air tastes like copper and smoke. People stop walking the path near your cottage. Even the priest, who used to pretend not to see you, has changed his route entirely. Good. Let them avoid you. Let them forget you're here. The wind is on your side now. One evening, while you're stirring a warming tonic for joint pain, you see 2 girls pass by on the ridge faces painted with ash and berries, hair braided in a pattern you recognize from old drawings. They stop, look toward the cottage. One of them laughs, not mocking, not mean, just curious. You hold your breath. She waves. You don't wave back. You think about it for the rest of the night. The dreams return, not strange. This time, not terrifying, just too real. The smell of smoke in your sheets, the feeling of cold water soaking your boots, the sound of laughter you haven't heard in years. You wake with your hands clenched and the taste of honey on your tongue. You haven't eaten honey in weeks. She watches you from the table, says nothing, slides a cup toward you. It's bitter. You drink it anyway. A few days later, the wind changes direction. The festival ends. The decorations come down. The village goes quiet. Too quiet. That's when the thefts start. Someone's goats go missing. A bag of grain disappears from the mill. A row of cabbages is torn from the earth and left rotting in a ditch. They don't accuse you, not directly, but the glances sharpen. The air tightens. The woman who used to leave eggs at your door now crosses herself when she sees your cloak. She tells you not to respond. Let them feed the fire with their own fear, she says. Ours needs no more kindling. You keep your head down. You scrub the jars. You recite the names of things in your head until they lose their shape. You teach yourself to braid cords tight enough to bind charms, but soft enough to wear in your hair. You fix the hinge on the back door with a strip of boiled leather. You don't leave the cottage for 5 days. Then a knock comes. Not at the front door. At the back. You and she both freeze. No one knocks there. You move together, silent. Practiced. 2 halves of one old spell. She opens the door with a knife in her hand. It's the blacksmith's daughter, bleeding from the lip, clutching something wrapped in cloth. I took it, she says. They made me, but I don't want it. It's wrong. You let her in. She sits by the fire. Her hands shake. You unwrap the cloth. It's bread, dark, dense, heavy as stone. You cut it open. Inside is a charm bones tied with wire, a piece of tooth, a scrap of fabric that smells like old blood. A trap. They said it would make you sick, the girl says, or weak, or something. She burns it without a word. The girl stays the night, sleeps on your old mat near the hearth. You give her a charm to wear. She leaves before sunrise, doesn't say goodbye. You watch her go. You think of the girls on the ridge. You wonder how many more are watching. She says nothing, but that night, she teaches you a new knot, one meant to hold things in place even when they want to leave. They come in pairs now, strangers. Mostly. Men with clean boots and cloaks that don't match the dirt, faces that scan too quickly, and eyes that don't quite settle. They knock softly, always after dusk, always with their hoods still up even indoors. You answer the door, and they never speak to you, only to her. She invites them in without warmth, but never with fear. She offers tea they never drink and waits for them to speak first. You stand behind her shoulder, silent, watchful, learning the shape of these visits. They ask for things, quiet things, a tincture for forgetting, a powder for sleep that can't be broken, a charm to keep a wife loyal, a thread to unbind a secret. Nothing kind, nothing honest. They place their coins with careful hands and avoid touching anything with a name. You write nothing down. She never tells you when they're coming, but the air always shifts the hour before heavier, slower, the way it does before a storm. After they leave, she lights a single black candle and lets it burn itself out, down to the wick. You asked her once why she never refuses them. Because refusing power only changes its direction, she said, not its destination. You didn't understand then. You still don't, but you've stopped asking. You begin to see them in town now. These men who shouldn't belong. One at the tavern, pretending to drink. One at the market, buying a single apple. One kneeling at the chapel, hands clasped too perfectly. The villagers don't speak to them, but they watch. And you wonder how much they know. How much they suspect. Or worse, how much they're being promised. That week, you find a black feather tucked under your pillow. Not from any bird you recognize. Sleek. Too long. Too clean. It's not a message. It's a receipt. You burn it with the rest of the leavings. But the smell lingers longer than it should. She watches you as you scrub your hands with a lie. There's no such thing as harmless curiosity, she says, slicing dried apple into perfect, paper-thin slivers. Not in this line of work. You've started locking your bedroom door. Bramble doesn't sleep at your feet anymore. The bell hasn't rung in days. The next stranger arrives with a limp and a coin the size of your palm. He says nothing, places the coin on the table, and sits without asking. She brings out a jar from the highest shelf, bone dust, and thread soaked in rainwater. You hold the candle steady while she works. He never looks at you, but when he leaves, he turns once at the door and says, "You'll be next." You don't know what he means. She does. She spends the evening scrubbing the floor with salt water and binding new charms into the rafters. You help. You don't speak. There's no language for the kind of warning he gave, just the silence that follows it. She doesn't sleep that night. You do, but only barely. The next morning, the cottage feels colder, but the fire's strong. She hands you a list of herbs to fetch ones you've never heard her mention before. You write them down. Fennel root split at dusk, ironwood bark, milkweed born on the new moon. She says nothing about what they're for. You don't ask. You pack your basket and leave at first light. The forest is quieter than usual. Even the birds keep their songs low. You find most of the herbs without trouble, but the ironwood eludes you. You search near the creek, past the old cairn, to the edge of the place she told you not to go. You hesitate, then step in. The trees there are wrong. Too tall, too straight, too still. The moss grows upward. The stones are warm. You find the bark you need thick, pale, bitter as bile, and take just enough. As you turn to leave, you see a figure at the edge of the clearing, not watching, waiting. No face, no features, just the shape of watching. You don't run, but you don't turn your back either. When you reach the cottage, your fingers are trembling and your boots are soaked. She takes one look at you and says, "Did you speak to it?" You shake your head. "Good," she says. "Next time, don't even look." You're starting to realize there are rules you haven't been told, rules that were never meant to be spoken. You write them down anyway, in your little book. In a new section, you label rules no one admits. Rule 1, don't ask for names. Rule 2, don't walk the same path twice in a row. Rule 3, salt in every room. Rule 4, the third knock is a lie. The strangers keep coming. One brings a vial filled with something that screams, You bury it at the crossroads. One brings a mirror that doesn't reflect your face. You wrap it in lead and drop it in the river. One just asks for a story. She tells him one that makes you feel cold. They always leave something behind. You start a box. Inside, you keep what doesn't burn teeth. Coins, stones, rings. A scrap of cloth that never dries. You don't know why, but she says they're anchors. You stop asking what they're anchoring. The villagers say nothing, but you can feel them turning. Their eyes stay on you a little longer. Their prayers grow louder when you pass. Someone etches a spiral into your doorframe backwards. Crude, angry. You sand it off and smear it with a lamb's blood. Not because you need to, but because they think you do. Power, she says, is 90% of theater. You don't know what the other 10% is. Maybe fear, maybe truth, maybe both. Clove returns one night carrying a dead mouse with human teeth. You burn it, then you clean the floor with vinegar until your hands ache. The moon turns full and you sleep outside for the first time in months. She says the cottage needs to breathe. You wrap yourself in a cloak and lie beside the herb garden. The wind murmurs. The ground hums. You dream of a stone doorway that opens to stars. When you wake, there's frost on your eyelashes and a coin under your tongue. She doesn't ask what you saw. She just hands you tea and tells you to be careful with your footsteps today. You are later. She teaches you how to walk without leaving tracks, and how to speak to things that don't have mouths. You practice until your throat is raw. You don't complain. You're beginning to understand. The storm comes without warning, no gradual build. No shifting clouds or twitching animals. Just a sudden crack in the sky, like the world has split its tongue open. Rain slaps the roof in frantic rhythms, and wind claws at the shutters as if it's trying to remember how to get inside. You rush to secure the drying racks. Herbs whipping in the gusts like frightened birds, while she moves faster than you've ever seen her bolting windows, dragging rugs to seal the door, tying black cords around the rafters. This isn't just weather, she says, and you know it's true. The house hums beneath your feet, boards vibrating with an energy that isn't from thunder alone. Bramble burrows deep under the hearthstones. Clove disappears entirely, and still the rain comes, not in sheets, but in spirals, pounding sideways, smelling of iron and ash. You've seen storms before. You've even seen strange ones. But this feels like something arrived. She lights every candle, even the ones you were taught not to touch. The ones sealed with wax so dark it absorbs the flame rather than glows. She draws a circle on the floor, not the usual kind for healing or clarity, but one with corners, angles, slashes. It looks like it would hurt if you touched it. You don't. She sprinkles something sharp across its edges. Salt, bone powder, broken glass, in case it walks. She murmurs. You don't ask what it is. The wind groans low like it's remembering an old language. The shutters rattle with pressure. The candle flames bend, not flicker. Bend toward the east wall, one by one. That's when you both hear it, a soft tapping. So faint, it could be mistaken for a memory. 3 times. Then silence. Then again. Don't move, she says. You freeze mid-breath. It doesn't want in, she adds. It wants acknowledgement. You wait. You don't give it. And eventually, the tapping stops. Historians still argue whether medieval storms were interpreted as divine punishment or demonic visitation. You think neither captures it. Sometimes the sky breaks simply because it can, because something unseen needs a crack to slide through. You feel it that night, seeping into the stone, into your bones. A vibration that doesn't stop when the wind does. Hours pass, the storm eases, but the air doesn't clear. It thickens. Inside, it's humid and heavy, like the breath of something watching. You clean in silence, rewrap the herbs that were knocked loose, relight the candles that sputtered out. She burns cedar and juniper, fans the smoke into every corner. You notice her hands trembling, just slightly, as she ties the final knot on the west-facing window. She sees you see her. Storms like that peel things open, she mutters. Some things don't want to be sealed again. That night, neither of you sleeps. You take turns pacing, listening. Clover turns just before dawn, soaked and shivering. Something clutched in her mouth, a strip of fabric, embroidered in red with a symbol you've never seen. She drops it at your feet and runs under the bed. You don't pick it up. She does. She burns it. This time, the fire turns green. The following morning is bright. Too bright. The kind of sunlight that doesn't warm, only exposes. The village is quiet again, but in that hushed way that means something is being discussed without being said. You're not mentioned, not directly, but you notice the way people keep glancing at the sky, the way the priest's robes are darker than usual, the way every child wears something red around their wrist. You ask her about it. Storm thread, she says. A charm against the wind taking something. Taking what? She doesn't answer. Instead, she sends you to the forest for starwort and bone ash. You don't ask what the second is for. You already know. You bring a pouch of soil from the storm's path. 2, just in case. The earth where the wind howled hardest smells different now. Not rot, not life, just wrong. You gather what you need, and on your way back, you see the spiral again carved into a tree this time. Deep, clean, intentional. It's spreading. When you return, she's on the roof, whispering to the chimney. You didn't even know she could get up there. She climbs down with a grace that feels borrowed from someone younger. They're testing the wards, she says, looking for cracks. You don't ask who. You just check the charms again, all of them. You don't sleep well. The next morning, you find a bird on the doorstep, intact, eyes open, neck broken. In its beak is a strand of your hair. You pluck it gently, burn it, then bury the bird under the rosemary bush. She nods when you tell her. They're getting personal. That day, you run out of salt. You never run out of salt. You make the trip to town reluctantly, hood up, pouch tied tight, every charm you know hidden under your sleeves. People stare, some flinch. The butcher's wife spits near your feet. The baker's apprentice waves again, smaller this time, more afraid. You don't stop moving. You buy the salt. You buy candles. You buy nothing else. On the way home, you notice footprints on the path that aren't yours. You follow them. They lead nowhere. That evening, she teaches you how to draw a binding ward using just your breath and a needle. You practice on the table, the floor, your own palm. It stings, but it holds. You carve one above your bed that night. The dream that comes is long. You're walking down a hallway lined with faces. They whisper in reverse. You understand anyway. One of them is yours, but older, mouth sewn shut. You wake before the candle burns out. She's already awake, boiling something that smells like regret and cloves. Neither of you speak, but you both start wearing knives again. The goat dies 3 days after the storm, and somehow, it's your fault. Not because you touched it, or cursed it, or looked at it wrong, but because everything strange now loops back to you. Like the village has decided that logic is optional when fear feels better. You hear about it first from the boy who trades eggs for salve. He doesn't even make it to your door, just leaves the basket on the stump and shouts into the trees. The goat's dead like it's a news bulletin and a warning all at once. You find the note tucked under the top egg. No milk, no breath, black tongue. You know what this means. You don't, but you also do, because this is how it starts. First the goat, then the whispers, then the meetings. You show her the note. She reads it once and then uses it to start the fire. They've been waiting for a body. She says, any body, any reason. You nod, throat tight, and start grinding dried rose hips for the ulcer tincture as if your hands haven't started shaking. By midday, the gossip is thick enough to touch. You go into the village to trade, and the air parts around you like oil on water. No one speaks, but their mouths are busy. The butcher looks at you like you stole from his soul. The smith nods once, but it's the kind of nod people give to coffins. Even the priest's candle flickers oddly when you pass the chapel, like the flame is second-guessing your shadow. The goat was old. Everyone knew that. Its teeth were bad, and its legs bowed like broken oaths. But none of that matters now. It died, and you exist, which is enough. You hurry back, eyes on the path, breath too loud in your ears. The forest doesn't feel like a place you return to. It feels like a refuge, like a mouth closing behind you. She's outside when you get there, arms coated in ash, drawing symbols on the stone with a piece of bone. You don't ask where the bone came from. She doesn't look up. They'll come with questions they've already answered. She says, "Don't try to argue with belief. Just stay inside." Historians still argue whether rural communities feared witches because of religion, survival, or simple projection. But here's the truth you've seen firsthand. A witch is just someone they've run out of explanations for. And sometimes it's easier to drag someone to a fire than admit you don't know why your goat's lungs filled with shadow overnight. That night, the house hums. Not from wind, not from storm, but from memory. The floorboards twitch, the rafters shift, even the salt feels restless. She burns nettle in every room. You light the bell candles. You braid your hair in threes. You put the knife back under your pillow, blade inward, as she taught you. There's no bell ring, but there doesn't need to be. The silence is shaped like a warning. The next morning, a villager appears, not the kind you expect. It's the weaver stooped, almost blind, a man who hasn't left his cottage in years. He comes slowly, leaning on a staff made from what looks like driftwood and regret. He doesn't knock, just stands near the garden, eyes clouded, voice shaking. "They're gathering," he says. "Even the quiet ones. You should make preparations." You thank him, offer him tea. He shakes his head and leaves without another word. You don't tell her. She already knows. She's sealing the windows again, but not the usual way. This time, she uses symbols from a language you've only seen carved into the spine of one forbidden book. Her hands move fast, but not frantically. She's done this before. You boil water, you grind salt with rosemary, you sweep every corner twice. That afternoon, the baker's daughter comes again, quiet, pale. She doesn't bring bread, just a small pouch, filled with dirt. It grew overnight. She whispers, "From nothing. We didn't plant anything there." You open the pouch and stare. What's inside isn't soil. It's something that looks like it used to be wood and now wants to be flesh. You burn it immediately. The flame turns blue, then clear, then disappears entirely. The girl doesn't flinch. She looks at you and asks, "Can you stop them?" You don't answer. She leaves before dusk. That evening, she finally shows you the escape path. She pulls up the rug in the far corner, the one you've never been allowed to touch. Beneath it, a hatch. Beneath that, a tunnel. Narrow, dry, lined with ash and old prayers. If they come too early, she says, you take the bag near the hearth, the book in the cupboard, and the charm in your left boot. You go. You don't look back. Not even once. Where does it lead? Somewhere else. She doesn't elaborate. You memorize the path, the turn near the root wall, the low beam you'll have to duck under, the sound of the stones when they shift under your feet. You walk it twice, silently, then once with your eyes closed. You sleep near the door that night. But the night passes without fire, without shouts, without stones, just silence again, the kind that wraps around you like a second skin. You dream of the goat not dead, but speaking, telling you riddles in a language made of chewing and hoofbeats. You wake up cold. Bramble is gone again. The next day, there's a gathering in the square. Not official, not announced, but everyone is there. You watch from the ridge, cloaked, hidden. Someone speaks. You can't hear the words, but the body language says everything. Anger, frustration, blame looking for a direction. They circle something a stone, maybe, or a book, or a piece of cloth. Then they chant. It's clumsy, borrowed, half remembered, but it echoes. She watches beside you, arms crossed, mouth tight. They've begun without even knowing how. She says, "That's the most dangerous kind." You return to the cottage. You pack a second bag. You sharpen your knife. You sleep dressed. But no one comes that night, or the next, which is worse, because you know they will, and waiting is the hardest spell of all. They don't call it a trial. That would make it real. That would make it official, with records and rules and responsibilities. Instead, they call it a discussion, a gathering of concerned voices, held in the tavern's back room where the ceilings are low and the air smells like sour ale and suspicion. You only know because the blacksmith's boy came running eyes wide, mouth tight, face pale enough to make you stop mixing the cough tonic mid-stir. "They're talking about you," he whispers. "About her." You don't ask how he knows. You just wipe your hands, leave the fire burning, and walk out the back door. She doesn't stop you. She just says, "Don't speak, just listen, and wear something dull." You don't have anything but dull. You keep to the shadows. Stay behind the buildings. You know every alley now, every loose plank, every wall that creaks under pressure. You slip into the tavern like smoke, press yourself behind a beam, and listen. At first, it's just noise, frustration, fear. Stories twisted so tightly around each other they've become a rope. The goat, the storm, the bread, the girl. One by one, people speak, offering fragments of truth wrapped in worry. "I saw her mixing something black. My child hasn't slept in days. The crops turned bitter after she passed." They don't say your names, but they don't have to. Everyone knows who they means. Then someone laughs. Not kindly. "Suppose we did ask questions," he says. "Suppose we did bring them in. No harm in just asking." Right. And that's when the mood shifts. That's when it gets teeth. Because there's always one. One who takes fear and feeds it to others with a spoon. You lean forward, heart pounding, breath caught in your throat, not from terror, but from the terrifying realization that you expected this. And worse, you trained for it. Historians still argue whether these pretrial accusations were genuine fears or social theater rituals meant to reassure the crowd more than find the truth. But you see clearly now it's both. They want justice, but not in the legal sense. They want cleansing, someone to hold their unease so they don't have to carry it anymore. And you're small, quiet, half visible, and standing beside someone who never flinched in the face of their trembling gods. Of course they'd choose you. You slip out before the talk ends. You don't need to hear the vote. You already know. You take the long way home, circling through the woods, picking up your own tracks, wiping your boots clean with pine needles, removing any trace. When you return, she's sitting in the garden, feeding the fire with herbs that shouldn't burn green. "Well," she asks. You nod. "They're rehearsing." She smiles. "Bitter as wormwood. Told you they would." That night, she gives you a new charm. Not a protection, a preparation. It's a piece of wax, folded with a thorn and a seed. "Don't bury it until the wind changes," she says. "And not in your own shadow." You don't ask what happens if you get it wrong. The days that follow are strange. Not tense, not frantic. Just quiet the way silence comes before an arrow. The village pretends nothing is wrong, but the rhythm has changed. The priest's sermons last longer. The baker's bread is burned. The children wear charms on both wrists now. One girl wears hers on her tongue. You see it when she spits in the dirt near your path. You don't go to town after that. You don't leave the ridge at all. Inside, you prepare. You polish the blade. You iron your cloak. You count your jars. You repack your bags. You review the tunnel again. Every board, every turn, every spot where you'll have to crawl. She doesn't hover, doesn't correct, just watches. Her silence is not disapproval, it's graduation. One night, you ask what she did the first time they came for her. She doesn't answer, but she holds your hand. Her skin is colder than usual. Then the real rehearsal comes. It's subtle. 2 men arrive near midnight. Not villagers, not strangers, either. They knock softly, politely. You answer. They remove their hats. Just a few questions. They say, "A routine check." She steps forward, offers tea. They decline. Ask to see your supplies. Safety precautions. They say, just to ensure you're not keeping anything unstable. She lets them. You do, too. But you know they're not counting jars. They're counting exits, measuring resistance. One of them lingers at your bed, picks up the charm carved into the headboard. Smiles. Clever. You say nothing. He leaves it. When they're gone, she breathes differently. Next time they'll knock louder, she says, and they won't wear smiles. You sleep with one boot on. The next morning, the spiral is back. Not carved, drawn in red. On your door, this time, you don't clean it. You leave it there, untouched, like a scar. That evening, she tells you a story. Not with drama, not with fear, just quiet detail. Like she's folding laundry. Once, I tried to explain, she says. Tried to show them I was useful, helpful, safe. I brewed their medicines, birthed their babies, bled for their sick, and still they came with fire. You ask how she survived. She shrugs. Didn't, not all the way. Pieces of me stayed in that ash. She stands, brushes dust from her lap, and says, but they missed a piece. You look at her, she looks at you, and suddenly you understand. The next day, the garden won't grow. You bury the seed, not in your shadow. You burn a leaf without fire. You wake without dreaming. You braid your hair into 7 twists. The charm above your door breaks on its own. That night, they vote. You're not there, but the wind carries sound. You hear your name twice, then silence, then footsteps, then nothing. She wakes you before the sky has even softened. Her hand on your shoulder, firm but not rushed. It's time, she says, and you already know what she means. You dress in silence. You don't pack your bags, been ready for weeks. She doesn't give you instructions. She doesn't need to. Every step of this was rehearsed in glances, in pauses, in the weight of the air when someone said your name too loudly. You tie your cloak, tuck the bone-handled knife into your boot, and sling the satchel across your shoulder. The hearth is cold. The charm above the door hangs still. Clove sits by the window, staring into the trees, tail twitching like a metronome, counting down something final. Bramble's been gone for 2 days. You pretend not to worry about that. She doesn't offer comfort. She offers a nod. Then she lifts the floorboard. The tunnel breathes as you descend, musty and warm, lined with dust and whispers, a straight line into the unknown. You light the stub of a candle, not because you need to see, but because it's something to do with your hands. Behind you, the hatch closes, not gently, not slowly, just shut. You hear her sealing it from the inside. You try not to read too much into that. You walk. The tunnel was never meant to be used often. It groans under your weight, stones shifting, roots brushing your cheeks like fingers too eager. You don't look back. You remember her voice. Don't look back. Not even once. You focus on your breath, on the sound of your own boots, on the beat of your heart keeping time with a slow drip of something unseen. You pass the markings carved into the beam's wards, names, warnings. One symbol pulses faintly in the dark, and you touch it out of instinct. It bites your finger, just a prick, enough to remind you that magic always demands something small before it asks for more. The tunnel ends at a hollow in the hill, a place you've passed before, but never noticed. That's the trick of it. You step out into morning that doesn't feel like morning. The light is wrong, not soft, but sharp, like the sun is being filtered through suspicion. You cover your face, adjust your cloak, and take the long path around the village. You don't go toward the road. Not yet. You wait. You wait because she told you if they come too early, I'll stall them. If they come too late, you'll already be gone. But if they come right on time, then it's your turn to choose what burns. And they do come. You see them from the ridge. A small group. Not an angry mob, not yet. But prepared. Tools in hand. Not pitchforks, but hammers, ropes, torches. And that's worse. Anger is wild. This is organized. They knock on the front door. She opens it. You can't hear what she says, but you see the way her hand moves. The way she leans on her cane, her back suddenly hunched, like she's aged 10 winters overnight. She's playing a role, the harmless old woman, the one they almost forgot they needed. She points inside. They hesitate, and then they enter. You hold your breath. Time stretches, sticky and strange. Then smoke curls from the chimney. Then a shout. Then silence. Then the roof cracks. You don't move. Not until the wind shifts. Not until the light changes. Not until you feel it the exact moment the charm she gave you in your boot snaps like a thread under pressure. That's the signal. Not a sound. A snap. You run. You don't look back. Not even when you hear someone call your name, not hers. Yours from the trees. Not even when something inside you breaks open like an egg. You run through the trees, past the stump, past the circle of stones that used to sing if you stepped on them wrong, past the well with the broken handle, past the place the goat died, past everything. You don't stop until the sun is too high and your lungs feel scorched. You find a stream, you drink, you wash the soot from your cheeks, you breathe, and then you sit with it, the knowledge, the weight, the smoke still curling in the distance like a ribbon of history being rewritten in real time. You wonder if they'll mark the ground where she stood, if they'll pretend she ran, or confess they found nothing. Maybe they'll say she vanished. Maybe they'll say you were never there. Historians still argue whether the ones who survived were cowards or clever, whether they abandoned their teachers or carried them forward in silence. You think that's the wrong question. Survival isn't a side in a debate. It's a continuation, and you're still breathing. You open the satchel, inside dried lavender, a carved spoon, 3 silver rings that weren't hers, and a letter, sealed in wax the color of blood oranges. You don't open it yet. Instead, you walk, toward nowhere in particular, just away, toward what comes next. You sleep under trees, you eat what you know is safe, you listen to the birds, you avoid paths, you dream of her hands, her laugh, the way she stirred stew clockwise unless someone was lying. You don't cry, not at first, not until the 3rd night. When you finally open the letter, it says only this: you were never meant to stay. You were meant to survive. Now teach, but do it quietly. The loud ones burn first. You fold it. You don't sign your name on anything after that. You find a village 3 weeks later. You wear a different cloak. You keep your herbs simple, your words simpler. You heal without titles. You nod a lot. You never say the word witch, but they come anyway. A child with fever, a man with rot in his toes, a woman who forgot her name. You help them all, quietly, carefully, and sometimes, when no one is looking, you hang a charm on your door. Just a small one, made of thread, bent into a shape only you remember. A shape that once marked a door that burned. The new village does not ask questions, at least. Not the kind that matter. They ask where you're from, but only in the casual way people ask things they don't expect real answers to. You say south, and they nod like that's enough. They ask if you've worked with herbs before. You say a little, and they smile as if you've admitted to knowing how to patch a boot or mend a shirt. You rent a room above a bakery that smells of yeast and smoke, and the woman who owns it says, "Just don't bring anything strange up the stairs." All right, you agree. You bring strange things anyway, but only after dark, and only in bags wrapped twice. You keep your charm small, salt sewn into the corners of your pillow, 1 sprig of rue under the window. You talk less, nod more, and never, ever wear black. Your hands remember faster than your voice does. You find yourself crushing elderberries without thinking, tying bundles of hyssop with muscle memory rather than plan. You try to forget the cottage, the storm, the tunnel, but it comes back when your fingers wrap thread around a charm, or when a crow lands just a little too close. You almost forget how silent she was, how much she let the air speak first. Now, you practice that too. Let people come to you, let their silences ask the questions. It doesn't take long. A man with a limp and a toothache. You hand him a warm compress. No spell. A girl with nightmares. You teach her how to breathe before sleep, how to place a coin under her pillow and wake it up with a question. A farmer whose cows won't eat. You show him how to burn bitter bark outside the barn. He thanks you with a head nod and avoids your eyes. Perfect. That's exactly the right amount of closeness. You work quietly, carefully. You don't call yourself anything. You don't leave your shutters open after dusk. You keep your hair plain, your apron clean, your steps soft. You teach a boy to make a salve for burns. You teach an old woman to identify feverfew. You teach without teaching. You help without helping too much. The trick, you've learned, is to remain useful but not powerful, kind but not needed. Never be the answer to too many questions. Historians still argue whether people like you disappeared because they were erased or because they chose silence as safety. You know it's both. You become smaller on purpose, not because you lack the fire, but because you remember how quickly warmth turns into kindling. You see it in the village chapel, where the new priest preaches gentleness but locks his doors from the inside. You see it in the children's eyes when you pass curious, but not too curious, just enough. There's a moment, one evening, when you find a charm hanging on your own door. It's crude, sloppily tied, probably a child's attempt at mimicry, but it's there. A loop of straw, a berry, a button. You leave it. Not because it works, but because it was made to. That's enough. That night, you light a candle and trace the air above the flame 3 times. A habit, a hope, a promise. Weeks stretch into months. The bakery roof leaks. The wind whistles through the shutters. The earth softens and hardens again. One morning, someone knocks on your door, not a client, but a messenger. You open it slowly. She's young, nervous, holding a wrapped package. Someone left this for you, she says. You ask who, she shrugs. Didn't say, just said it was for the woman with the quiet hands. You wait to open it. You stare at it for hours. When you finally pull back the cloth, inside is a stone smooth, flat, carved with a symbol only you should know, one that marked the tunnel, the one you walk through without turning back. You run your fingers across it. It's warm. You wrap it again and tuck it under your bed. You don't sleep that night. The next day, you notice someone watching from across the street. Just once. Just for a second. A man with a scar on his lip, a limp that doesn't match his stride. He disappears before you can decide what to do. You clean your shelves, rebind your herbs, move the charm to the inside of your door. The next week, the priest preaches against unnatural women. You don't go to town for 3 days, but nothing happens, and that's worse, because waiting, again, is a kind of haunting. You keep your head low, you make your tea, you fix a young mother's rash, you listen to a man cry about his wife without offering a cure, you stay plain, stay boring, stay useful. You hang laundry like anyone else. You sweep your step, you give the baker's son a charm for courage and tell him it's just a lucky stone. One night, you hear singing in the alley, not words, not human. You don't investigate, you just light a candle and sit beside it. The flame stays upright. That's enough. Until it isn't. One morning, a child falls ill. No fever, no wounds, just gone. Somehow staring at nothing, unmoving, breathing slow and thin. They try the priest, nothing. They try the herbalist 2 towns over, still nothing. Then they try you. You tell them to bring rosemary, clean water, and absolute silence. They do. You sit beside the child. You hum not a spell, not a cure, just a song you remember her humming during cold months when the wind crept under the walls. You place the rosemary beneath the child's tongue. You speak a name you haven't spoken in months. You don't know if it works, but the child blinks and cries and returns. The mother sobs. The village goes quiet. You return to your room. You wait. And sure enough, 2 days later, another knock. Not a client, not a friend, a visitor with no name. You help them, he says. You shouldn't have. You close the door. The charm on the inside of it hums. Later that night, someone scrawls a mark on your shutters. A circle. No symbol. Just an opening. That's all it takes. You don't sleep. You don't run. You sit by your candle, and you wait. Again, morning arrives like a question with no answer. The shutters are still marked. The villagers are quieter than usual, their eyes softer but heavier, as if each glance carries a weight they aren't ready to hold. You don't leave your room. You steep tea, grind herbs, rearrange the jars that don't need rearranging. There's nothing to do, and too much to think about. You sit by the window and watch the street like it might tell you something, like it might speak first. But the village is keeping its breath tucked behind its teeth. They don't know what to do with you now. You're not one of them. but you've helped too many to forget. You've done what the priest couldn't, what the healer 2 towns over wouldn't. You returned a child from the edge. That changes things. But change makes people nervous, and nervous people look for fires to point at even before there's smoke. By the time noon arrives, you've already redrawn the lines of salt, polished the charm above your bed, double-stitched the hidden seam where you keep the powdered wormwood. You eat only bread, sip broth, touch nothing sweet. You've learned the hard way that sweetness invites things. You write nothing down. You sharpen your knife not because you expect danger, but because it steadies your hand. You speak aloud once, to the silence. Not yet. Then you go still again. The knock doesn't come until dusk. It's gentle, then again, louder. You answer, "It's the girl, the one who left the charm months ago. She's older now, not in years, but in posture. She doesn't fidget, doesn't blink too much. She hands you a note and says, 'From someone who remembers.' Then she turns and walks away before you can ask. The note is short, ink smudged, folded twice, inside north of the hollow oak. When it's time, no name, no mark, but the handwriting is hers. You breathe, deep, slow, the way she taught you to when fear crowds out thought. You tuck the note inside your apron. You go back to work. That night, the wind whistles in patterns, the kind that make candles bend, not flicker. You dream of mirrors with no reflections, of staircases that lead downward even when you climb. You wake before sunrise, heart pounding with no memory of what chased you. Bramble still hasn't returned. You go to the market as if everything is fine. You buy cloves. You buy thread. You buy a fish that's already going bad. The butcher avoids your eyes. The baker's wife, once your quiet supporter, hands you your change like it burns. The priest walks by and pretends not to notice the charm you now wear openly around your neck, a loop of iron thread and bone ash. Let them notice. You didn't ask to be seen. You only asked to be left alone. But now they've seen too much. Now they're waiting. You spend the afternoon preparing salves for things no one has complained about yet. Rashes that haven't itched. Fevers that haven't burned. You tie your bundles tighter than usual. Your fingers move with a rhythm that isn't entirely yours anymore. You think about the tunnel, the cottage, the stone, the crackling of wood that wasn't ready to burn but did anyway. You think about her face, not the one she showed the village, but the one you saw when the fire reached her skirts, and she still didn't scream. You wonder if you'd be that quiet. You wonder if you'll have to find out. Historians still argue whether survivors of old witch hunts became new ones. If the memory of fire clung to their children like smoke, you know memory is thicker than blood. You carry it in your hands, in the way you open doors slowly, in the way you say your own name like it might be borrowed. You carry her in the herbs you tie, and the way you never sing too loudly. You carry them, all the ones who were never written about. Not because their stories weren't important, but because their stories were dangerous. That night, you light no candles. You eat no food. You sit in stillness. The wind knocks once, then stops. You wait for morning. It doesn't come, at least not properly. The sky is gray, dull, the kind of color that means something is hiding in plain sight. You walk to the edge of the village. The hollow oak is there, as it always was, gnarled, split, filled with rot and memory. You run your fingers along its bark. Wait, then find it a thread, thin, red, tucked between the roots. You pull it. The ground gives, just slightly, just enough to reveal the opening. You don't go down, not yet. You mark it with a stone, with a petal, with a breath, then you return. 'Cause if it is time, you'll know. Not because someone tells you, but because the air will shift, and the house will hum, and your name will be said by someone who shouldn't know it. And the bell will ring, the one you haven't heard since the cottage, the one you buried under your pillow in the new room, swearing you'd never use it. It rings that night, once, then again, not by wind, not by chance, but by invitation. You close your book, you tie your boots, you place 3 drops of rosemary oil behind each ear. You pick up your bag, you walk to the oak, and this time, you climb in. The tunnel is short, uneven, it smells of clay and sage. At the end, a room, small, lit with a single candle. On the floor, a book. On the wall, a mark. On the table, a charm. None of it is new. All of it is hers. You sit, you wait, then a voice, not hers, but close, says, "It's not over." You say nothing. You just nod and begin again. You stay in the hidden room for 3 days. Maybe more time bends strangely underground, where the air tastes like root and smoke and memory. No one comes, no one calls, but you don't need noise to know what's happening above. The stillness carries meaning. You imagine the village like a pond after a thrown stone ripples softening, widening, touching everyone whether they noticed or not. They'll be wondering now where you went, why your window never opened, why the baker's yeast won't rise, why the priest's candle won't stay lit, why the girl with the night terrors woke up last night without screaming for the first time in months. Because when you disappear, something always shifts. That's what they never understand. You were never just a shadow. You were the thread. The space is small but alive. A shelf carved into the wall holds 3 jars mint, poppy, and 1 unlabeled. A stool made of driftwood leans slightly but holds your weight. The candle burns without shrinking. You don't question that. You just tend it. Breathe with it. Listen. It hums sometimes. Not a sound exactly. More a vibration. A note you can only hear if you stop trying to hear it. You write things down. Not spells. Not names. Just fragments. Thoughts that arrive with the air. The body remembers fire. Roots hold more than water. Be smaller than your noise. You don't try to make sense of them. You just let them arrive. On the 4th day or what feels like it a knock. But not on wood. On air. A soft rhythm in your chest. Like your heart is being tapped on from the inside. You rise. Pack your satchel. Press your ear to the wall. No sound. No signal. But you know. It's time. You leave the candle burning. You take nothing that wasn't yours. The tunnel leads back the way you came. And when you crawl out, the oak is exactly as you left it, silent, split, indifferent. The sky is gray, the clouds thick. The path back to the village is clear, but you don't follow it. You go west instead, through the trees, where no roads reach, where no one sees. You find a place, not a cottage, not a house, just a clearing with a circle of stones and a stream that talks in its sleep. You sit, you listen, you let the earth press its silence against your spine. You're not running, you're not hiding, you're becoming. That's the part they always missed. They thought witches were made in fire, but you know better. Witches are made in stillness, in rooms without witnesses, in choices made when no one is watching, in rooms like the one you just left. And now, slowly, people begin to come. Not many, not loud. One brings a child with a crooked foot. You make her shoes from bark and thread. One brings a dream that won't leave. You give her a song that doesn't rhyme. One brings nothing but sits across from you for hours. When she leaves, she whispers, "I remember you." You don't ask from where. You help them. Quietly, you teach them to help themselves. Quietly, you plant mint along the stream. You hang nettles to dry from a line between trees. You mark the edges of the clearing with bone and honey and laughter. Not all protections are bitter. Some are built from sweetness, but only if you earn it. The birds return, so does Bramble. Older now, he limps, but he lies across your lap like no time has passed at all. Clove is still missing, but you feel her watching. You sleep when the moon allows. You write less, you speak less, but when you do speak, it matters. One girl asks if she can stay. You ask if she's ready to stop pretending. She nods. You give her a broom and a task. Nothing magical. Just practical. Because the first spell is always routine. If you can care for the floor, you can care for the flame. One night, you light a candle and hear a name in the smoke. Hers. You smile. You don't cry. You just whisper back, "I'm still listening." Historians still argue whether witches left legacies or just smoke trails, whether their power lived on in blood or rumor, whether the silence that followed them was peace or a warning. You know the truth is softer, not either or, just continuation. Like a lullaby passed down without a melody, like a charm hung in a kitchen window without knowing why, like a child tying red thread around her wrist and feeling safer. You become the kind of woman they don't know how to thank, and that's fine. They leave apples. They leave notes, sometimes just stones shaped like hearts. One day, a letter arrives, no sender, no signature, just a pressed sprig of rue and a question, did you survive? You write back, I became. You never hear from them again. The seasons blur, the garden grows, the stream deepens. People forget your face, but remember your path. A boy calls you the root wife. A woman calls you the quiet thorn. A child just calls you kind. You don't correct them. Names don't matter anymore. Only the work, only the waiting, only the way your hands know when someone is near and what they need before they say a word. One evening, you step outside and the wind stills. You feel it, the moment, the breath between stories. The hush that comes before a name is spoken again, and you whisper it yourself, just once. The one she gave you when you arrived, not the one the village used. The real one, the one that isn't a secret, but a promise. You whisper it into the night, and the trees bow slightly, like they remember too. And now, the story settles, like leaves drifting to the forest floor after a long wind. You're still here, in the hush of your room. The lights dimmed, the world finally quiet. The echoes of footsteps through tunnels, the rustle of herbs, the creak of floorboards under moonlight, all of it fades gently, slowly, without urgency. Nothing chases you now. Nothing presses against your thoughts. Just the rhythm of your breath and the slow exhale of a story well traveled. Imagine the clearing, the one with the stones and the stream. The wind no longer speaks in riddles there. It hums, soft and low, the way lullabies sound when no one needs them to be perfect. There are no trials tonight, no knocks at the door, just the warmth of a candle flickering on old wood, and the memory of a woman who stirred dreams into soup and tied safety into thread. You are safe here. You were always safe here. Whatever followed you into this night has found its place, and whatever you carried, fear, doubt, names that didn't fit, can be left behind now. Let them sink gently into the earth. Let them be softened by sleep, cradled by silence, until they no longer ask for your attention. You've done enough. You've learned enough. You've become. So rest now. Let the story hold you. Let sleep take its time. And if you dream, may it be quiet, kind, and full of small, forgotten magic.